Topic 6. Voter registration. Tema 6. Registro electoral. In our 6th episode, we will be discussing voter registration with Hispanic Caucus Committeewoman on the State Democratic Executive Committee, Tzatzil LeMair. En nuestro 6º episodio vamos a discutir cómo registrarse para votar con Tzatzil LeMair, líder del comité demócrata del Caucus Hispano. Welcome to Colecciones y Conexiones.
Okay, thank you. It's great being here, Victor.
Thank you. So in this episode, we're going to be discussing voter registration, and I feel like especially since the deadline is coming right up around the corner, it's an especially important topic. So what is your experience with voting?
Well, my personal experience with voting, I don't think I was really that interested in politics when I was, your age. It wasn't until much later in my life that it became a priority. Essentially, it really became, I always felt that I was a pretty good citizen. So I voted for presidential elections every 4 years, and that was about it. I was really not involved in local politics and local elections, because I felt like I didn't even know who was running. And so why go vote if you didn't even know like what was on the ballot or who was on the ballot? But, as long as I voted every 4 years, I felt like that was my duty, as a good citizen. And boy, have I really changed my perspective about voting. Essentially, with the 2016 election, like that's where I first became very engaged. And I believe that this happened to a lot of people like myself who were just, every 4-year voters. And then after 2016, we realized that we're leaving our future in the hands of very, very few people who are the ones that are actually making the decisions, who are deciding who is going to govern us. And so at that point, I started getting involved and just learning, right? Like just trying to find out, okay, what's going on? What's the structure of, who's actually running, making all the decisions for us, not just on a national level, but a state level and local level. So I became a much more active voter in 2016. And so here we are, 2020, and I am a completely different person when it comes to that part of, my civic duty. So I have become a total, evangelist, if you want to say, to when it comes to educating, especially young people and people of color, because I feel like they make it particularly hard for young voters to vote and people of color. And by they is the people that are currently in power. So I'm very excited to be here, Victor, because it's great to see young people that are actually interested in this stuff. It gives me hope for the future.
Yes, I had a podcast episode, I believe it was 2 or 3 podcast episodes ago, and it actually talked about, all the misconceptions, because I'm sure you've heard the myth quite a few times that, one vote doesn't really matter. And I actually did some research, and I found, I think even within the last 10 years, there's been at least 5 elections that have come down to within like 0.1% of the vote. And sometimes, they've tied before. And I thought that was really interesting, especially since one of them actually, they tied and there was a tiebreaker vote, and that determined who had the majority in the Senate. So I thought that was super interesting that, had one person voted instead of, not voting, the whole majority could have flipped. We could have had completely different policies. And that's why I think that, voter registration is so important, because especially now, and especially that we have younger people, younger political activists. We've got people that they want to speak with actions instead of words. And so that's why I think, especially now that, my grade is, some of us can vote, some of us can't. Unfortunately, I cannot, but some of the older ones in our grade actually can vote. And so that's why I thought it was so interesting. And, I researched the amount of Latinos that do vote, what population and, the places that they're heavily centered in. And I realized that the Latino vote is really important in, all over the US, but especially in a few states. And sometimes they get caught up in either thinking that their vote doesn't matter, or they have difficulty, registering, whether it's, a difficult process or there might be a language barrier. So that's why I think it's, that's why I'm super happy to have you here, because I get to have somebody who knows everything about this, who, interacts with Latinos and Hispanic people all day. And I'm really excited to get the whole message out about voter registration.
Well, let me tell you something. I have some good news. So before 2016, the previous midterm election, right, was 2014. Mm-hmm. And in 2014, 24% of Hispanics, of eligible voters, voted. 24%. In a presidential year, we had in 2016, I believe we had 38% of the Hispanic vote. And in 2018, which was the following midterm election, right, which was a phenomenal year for Texas politics, pretty much thanks to Beto O'Rourke. Like, he really energized. That was like the most exciting midterm election in decades, if not ever. Mm-hmm. Most people don't vote in midterm elections, right? They don't even know like really what's on the ballot. Again, as long as if it's not presidential, they don't really care. Well, in 2018, the Hispanic voter turnout went up from 24%, that was in 2014, to over 40%. So
that's almost doubled.
Presidential level turnout. So I'm hoping that we can continue that. I'm really hoping. I mean, and we were really, I worked on the Beto O'Rourke campaign. It was like super exciting. And I'm really hoping that we can build on from that. And let me tell you one more thing that you mentioned about talking about, like, people think my vote doesn't count. One of the saddest statistics that I heard from the 2018 vote, and this makes me really angry, is that, Travis County is a, Democratic county. Travis County votes Democrat. It's a well-known fact, and a lot of people really don't understand the difference. They don't understand that every vote counts. They think, well, if Travis County is Democrat, whether I vote or not, it won't make a difference, right? Well, let me tell you, Beto O'Rourke was less than 3 points away from winning. So it's 2.7%, I believe, right? That was so close to beating Ted Cruz. If every registered Democrat in Travis County had actually voted, he would have won. Wow. But the problem is only 60% of registered Democrats in Travis County voted. So just one county in Texas. That's how close he was to winning. And that's how important every vote counts, because it's not like the whole county then counts for 1 point. No, every single vote counts. And this is what people don't understand. They think, well, I live in a Republican county, and I'm a Democrat. My vote's not going to count. It counts on elections, on statewide elections, where every single vote counts. And so it's really important that people realize that. The other thing that I find is that a lot of, especially young people, they feel like it's not in their priority. They feel like it's not, I have too much going on. It's not my priority to vote. I have too many other things that were, a lot more important, like paying rent, and I can't skip a day from work to go stand in line and vote. And they don't realize that it should be a priority, especially for young people, because you're leaving, when it comes to healthcare, education, that's all going to be affecting you directly, right? Your college tuition, your, everything. And so you need to make sure that you elect people that represent your interests. And also going down the ballot, right? Going down ballot is incredibly important, especially this year, because this is the first time that you won't be able to vote straight ticket voting, which is something that it changed in the last cycle. And essentially, before you were able to just say, I'm going to vote Democrat or Republican, and everything would fill out. Now you have to go one by one through the entire ballot. And a lot of people get tired. They go once they go past president and senator, whatever, they're like, okay, and they leave the booth before they finish filling the ballot. So this year, it's really important that we spread the word and tell everyone that you have to make sure you go all the way down ballot, vote straight all the way down ballot. But yes, you brought up a great point about registering to vote. October 5th, if you want to vote in November, you have to make sure you register before October 5th. And if you're 17 years old, 17 and 10 months, you can register to vote. You have to be 18 to vote. But just, be ready to register to vote. And it's too bad you won't get to vote this year?
Nope. January 1st. So I'm I'd say 2 months off?
But you know what? You can still volunteer. You can still.
I can, yeah. I'm going to look into that, see what I can do to help the voting, maybe work at a voting booth type thing, just volunteer on the day off or something. Because, like you said, there were 60% of votes, they had 60% of votes, and most people would think, wow, that's, super good, but it wasn't enough. You want to have as many people voting because, that represents, the more people you have voting, the closer you get to representing all of your citizens, no matter, not even politically one side or the other. If you have 90% of people voting, you're going to be able to represent a better scope of your citizens than, if you have 75% of people voting. So that's just the importance of registering.
Something to keep in mind. 30% of the population voted for Trump, and he's our president. Mm-hmm. That's what it took.
It's all about each vote matters, whether you think it does or not. Each of the votes are just as important as the next one, which is what I've been trying to tell a lot of people. But it just takes a lot of statistics and a lot of facts to really prove that each individual vote matters, and it's worth it to take the time out of your day, take a day off work, and stand in those lines sometimes. But at the end of the day, it's a result that it's about the result you want to get.
And on that note about standing in line, this year is going to be, with coronavirus and everything, it's going to be a challenging election for sure. But one piece of good news, the governor did extend early voting by a week. So this is actually fantastic news. But people need to take advantage of that. We know that it's going to be difficult getting poll workers to work on election day, because the other thing that has happened is that they also, Governor Abbott passed essentially a mandate that if you're a poll worker, you don't have to wear, PEP, you don't have to wear a face mask, and you don't have to wear a face mask if you're going to vote, which is a insane mandate. But since he passed that, it's part of voter suppression, and that's a whole other, podcast that we can do. We can talk about the history of voter suppression, but because of the mask mandate, we do know that it's going to be difficult to find poll workers, because the majority of poll workers are people that are retired, and they're older, and they're probably not going to want to spend all day in an enclosed place where they're exposed to COVID-19. So we're trying to recruit younger people to work, and it's a paid position. It doesn't pay much, but it pays. And so we're really trying to get younger people to volunteer, to not volunteer, to sign up to be poll workers. But we also want to encourage everyone to vote early. You have 4 weeks to show up and vote early, and you don't have to wait in line. And that way you can, it won't be crowded. You can, plan your day. That's the other thing. You don't have to wait until election day. You can plan it out when it fits around your schedule. I feel like a lot of people don't take advantage of early voting. And so the best way to ensure that people are going to vote is to get them to make a plan. And so I would encourage you and to make sure all your friends that are eligible to vote to encourage them to have a plan in place. And before this pandemic, I always said, let's have voting parties, right? Let's plan, let's go vote together, and then we'll go have happy hour, drinks and dinner, or do in the morning, go vote together and then go have brunch. Like, make a plan and try to recruit friends that don't usually vote to, join your voting party and go vote. Make it a social event, right? Make it a fun thing to go do.
Yeah, I mean, that makes it sound a lot more fun than just, standing in line and voting. You get to have an incentive to do afterwards. But I find that the hardest part is, it's not that you turn 18 and you're automatically, able to vote. It's the fact that you have to be able to, picture yourself two months later, at the very minimum, voting. And that's the hard part, because a lot of people, you have to decide to vote almost before the election, because you've got to register to vote. And that's the hard part, because people feel as if voter registration is, super difficult. It's not worth it. It's just a waste of time. And if they change their mind, they're not going to be able to do it. So that the important part for me is making sure that people not only understand the importance of voting in the election, they have to think ahead and realize, okay, I want to be able to vote in this election, so that's why I want to register to vote. And that's what I think is, that's the whole purpose of this. It's trying to find a way to get people to realize, you have to think ahead. You have to plan ahead. It's not about, I'm waking up one day and I'm going to vote. It's about thinking, hey, in 3 months, I'm going to want to, do my civic duty as a citizen and vote for who I think can lead this country in the right direction. And, especially for... especially for people of color and minorities, that's especially hard. You have lower voting rates, and that's why I'm trying to encourage voter registration among the board, because I want to show that it's not as difficult as people are making it seem.
So that's a great point. It really should be easier than it is. There is no reason why it has to be a difficult process. And there's also no reason why, when you turn 18, you automatically register to vote. When you go get your driver's license, you should, automatically be registered to vote. But they do make it difficult. And this is, again, going back to voter suppression. It shouldn't be difficult, but it is in Texas especially. You cannot register to vote online. And this is really dumb, in this day and age, to not be able to register online. But so the process is, you go to votetexas.com, and you can fill out and print a form that you mail it in. I mean, it's silly, right? Yes, you put a stamp on it and you mail it in. If you are a college student and you live outside Texas, or if you are going to be traveling and you already know that you're going to be out of the country, then you can fill out an absentee ballot. So, I have 2 sons in college now. So, when you're in college, you move a lot also, right? 1 year you might live in a dorm, next semester you'll move into an apartment. And so your address constantly changes. And I think that part of the reason that they make it difficult for students to vote and for people to live overseas is just because, you're younger and more progressive. And so, they're like, let's make it a little bit harder for them to, to go vote. But it's a little bit tedious. You have to, again, print the form and fill it out and request an absentee ballot. And then you mail that in, and then they mail you a form back that you have to fill out saying exactly where you're going to be, where your address is. And then you mail that back, and then they mail you an absentee ballot. So it's like this 3-step thing. And but you know what? It's worth it. It's worth it. And that's the hard part, right? If you make it hard, it's like you have to really want to vote. And here we are trying to convince people to vote, and they don't make it easy. There are, luckily, and even the website, if you go to, votetexas.com it's not the friendliest website, but there are other resources out there. You can go to vote411.org, and I find that to be like the most helpful tool. I always tell people, go to vote411.org, and you can actually print a ballot. You can print your ballot. It'll show you, if you type your address, as you get closer to the date of the election, you can actually print your entire ballot and see who's running. And you can go to their website. It usually has like links to the websites of all the candidates. So you can actually do your homework. You can fill out your ballot, who you want to vote for, print it, and then take it with you to when you go vote. And then you already have all your selections. And then you can also share that with your friends and those who did not have the chance to do their homework. So this is something that I do, right? A lot of people in my community, they trust me. I'm the precinct chair for my area. And so they know that I do my homework. They know that I know the candidates. I meet them personally. I've had conversations with them. So my friends and family trust me. And a lot of times they're like, okay, can you share your ballot? Who are you voting for? And I send them my ballot. This is who I'm planning on voting for. This is why. And I've met them. And so I can share that information. And I feel like that is the way that it should be, right? In the U.S. government, we vote for representatives to represent us, to vote on our behalf when it comes to, laws. And so they should be community leaders that do the homework, that, that say, okay, guys, I've met these 3 candidates and this is what they stand for, and help educate people. So I would love to get younger people involved in running for precinct chair. There are a lot of vacancies actually, because people don't even know that there's such a thing as a precinct chair. And so it would be great to see more people of color and to see younger people filling those vacancies and just taking the step to become involved and lead their peers, because most precinct chairs in Travis County are older white people. And we know that Travis County is now minority majority county. So we need representation. We need kids like you, Victor.
Is there a certain website that you can go on to and sign up, precinct chair, all of that stuff? Is there a website you recommend to
Yes.
learn more details about it and sign up?
Yeah, absolutely. It depends where you live, right? And so I think, if you're in Travis County, so I'm a Democrat, right? So I go to Travis County Democrats. If you're a Republican, the Republicans have their own Travis County Republican Party, right? And so if you're, and you can find out, right? And that's if you already know, right? If you know what party you identify with, I would recommend you go to the local, right? Because of course you can go to Texas Democrats, or you can go to the DNC website, but I would go local. I would go to TravisCountyDemocrats.org and see, okay, who is my precinct chair, right? Who represents me? Who's my precinct chair? Oh, there isn't one. Okay, what do I need to do to run? And it's a great website. It has all the resources, right there. And also there's volunteer opportunities. Right now, it's a great time to volunteer. You don't have to leave your house. All you have to do is if you have an hour to volunteer, you can connect. You can support Julie Oliver, which is running for Congress, or MJ Hager running for Senate. And literally you spend 1 hour on the phone, calling people, reminding them to register to vote. It's so easy, and they'll give you a script, and it's a computer program. You log into your computer, and you just connect with people and tell them to go register to vote. 1 hour on a Saturday, and you will feel great about yourself for having volunteered, and you don't even have to leave your house. You can also sign up to send text messages. Again, it's all through computer program, so you know, you don't need to use your own cell phone or anything. You can sign up to send texts, sign up to make phone calls. You can write postcards. There's so many volunteer opportunities right now that you can do from the comfort of your home.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I'll be sure to look into that, and I'll post a few of those links that you've said so far in my little biography part of the video to make sure that people have accessibility. Like you said, it should be easier to register to vote. So a lot of times people get confused, you know, if they didn't vote in the last election, but they voted the one before that, and they're not sure about their like voter registration status. How do you recommend that you should like check whether you are registered to vote and whether you're allowed to vote or not?
So that is a really great point and a very tricky question, because so just this morning I went to votetexas.com, which is the state of Texas official website, and there's a little form that says check to see if you're registered to vote. And there's different ways that you can do that, right? One is putting your name, your date of birth, and your county, or you can put your driver's license and your name. So there's like 4 different ways that you can do it. And the first one that I did, it was just my name and and my address and the county. And it said that it couldn't find me. And I was like, I cannot believe that they couldn't find me. And then I tried a different mode, putting my driver's license, and it found me, right? And so it's like, I find that very disturbing, disturbing, because if I was one of those people that don't vote on a regular basis, if I wasn't completely 100% sure, like I am, that I'm registered to vote, I would be demoralized. I would be like if it was election day, right? And I'm like, oh, let me check to see if and it says that I'm not registered, right? I would be like, oh, then I'm not going to bother go vote, right? Why is it that on that official Texas website, they couldn't find me as a registered voter?
But when you put your driver's license, it did.
Yeah, so it's like there's all these discrepancies. So I wouldn't trust any. Unfortunately, I wouldn't trust that. That's the problem. So I would just, again, if you go to vote411.org, again, you can check there as well. There'll be links to check if you're registered. If you go to Travis County Democrats, there's another, there's a link to check if you're registered. But I would, again, try more than once.
Multiple different sources and make sure that you have it.
And it shouldn't be that way. And it's terrible that it is that way, but that's
but we've got to adapt to our current situation. So if you got to be really passionate about voting, and you got to check whether you're registered to vote, because, if you're not registered, no matter how badly you want to vote, you're not going to be able to. And I think that would be the worst thing. If you're really passionate about voting and then you get to election day and you realize you're not able to vote, that would be, it would be one of the worst things that you could do, because then you just don't have the ability to be represented by your vote.
Exactly. And something that people don't know is if you go vote and you don't have a voter ID, or you don't have, you can still vote. You can still cast your vote. They let you cast your vote, right? And then until you prove that you live where where you say that you live, like you have a window to like show up with your address, so a lot of people don't know that they can do that, because they don't advertise that. And in terms of IDs that you need to show, they tell you need to bring your driver's license or a passport or an official ID. But the truth is that you don't need those. You can also bring a bill. You can also bring a bank statement, just something that has your address. So
and probably more accessible than, birth certificate or passport or anything.
And so I think that a lot of people, they're like, oh, I don't have a photo ID. Well, I don't know if I'm registered. You should just go and cast that vote, But yeah, this year is going to be 100% about voter turnout. And I think right now we're less than 60 days away. We need to try to identify people that have not voted, that just moved into Austin or that turned 18, that are not registered to vote, and we have to get them registered to vote before October 5th. And once they take that step, your chances of voting, once you register to vote, once you make a donation to any race, any candidate, or any party, the moment somebody donates, even if it's as little as $5, it's been proven that their chances of voting increase tremendously, just because you're already invested.
You already have stake in the game.
Yeah. Volunteering, same thing. The moment somebody volunteers for a candidate or for anything, immediately your chances of becoming, an active voter increases. So what we want to do is try to engage people as much as possible, get them to volunteer once, get them to, donate, even if it's $5 to a campaign. And if everybody starts doing that and everybody starts, getting their friends to do that, that's how we win this. We win this by showing up and getting engaged and getting involved.
Okay, so I just want to go over a few important dates or details now, since that's probably what most people are going to figure. So when should people register to vote by?
October 5th.
October 5th, okay. And the websites that you said, you've got vote411.org, you've got the, Travis County Democrats, Travis County Republicans, and then Vote Texas. And are there any other things about, voting, voter registration, any of that stuff that you feel are super important that we should reiterate about?
Anything else that I haven't already mentioned?
I think you covered everything from my perspective. You covered, especially important if people are at college and then they decide which state to vote in.
Yes, that's super important. If you go to college in New York, right, like my kids are, that doesn't mean that you don't get to vote in Texas. You still, if you move and once you get a driver's license there, then if you want that to be your residence, you can choose to vote there. But make sure you register where your vote is needed, where your vote counts, where your
those battleground states.
So I think that, I think it's this year is going to be like no other year because of the pandemic. The stakes are higher than ever. I cannot say enough about the importance of the 2020 vote. Just look at where we are. Look at our situation. It's and making sure, again, voting down ballot. People don't realize that the decisions that are being made every day right here in the Capitol affect us directly, and we can definitely have a say in that. Don't leave local politics to the hand of the few. It's probably even more important than what's happening in Washington, D.C., what's happening right here. And that's something that I honestly did not understand before at all. I was really not interested in local politics. I only cared about what was happening in Washington, D.C. and around the world, but what really affects me personally is what's going on right here, even at the school board level, right? What my kids are being taught in school. That's what's important. And so that's why local elections and voting for a school board is incredibly important, more important than what's happening in Washington, D.C., right? And I think a lot of people do not understand the importance of city council,
absolutely,
school board, all those judges at the local level. So it doesn't take a lot. Thank God there's resources like vote411.org where you can actually find all the information in one place. Candidates, they fill out a form. It has a link to their website. It has answers to certain questions, and you can just read all about them, all about the different candidates. But I applaud you and your effort and what you're doing. We need more young people like you that are engaged and involved, because that really, like I said before, it gives me great hope for the future that we're gonna be okay. Thank
you so much for all the information. I think it'll make a huge difference. I'm I'm trying to, turn all this information to easily accessible things. And I feel like it was super important. This call meant a lot to me because I was able to get all this new information, and then I learned about all these volunteering things. So I really just want to thank you for your time. It was incredibly important to me, and I know you're very busy, but the fact that you were able to spare, 30 minutes of your day to talk to me meant a lot.
Yeah, no problem. It's like I said, I really enjoyed it, and I'm very happy to happy to do it, happy to help. Anytime, Victor, anytime you want to talk politics, I get fired up.
Sounds like a plan. Well, I don't think there's anything that you haven't covered. I think all of the questions that I've had that I felt Latinos and Hispanics would need are answered. And thank you so much for joining me on episode 6 of Correcciones y Conexiones. What are some common misconceptions about voter registration? Some common misconceptions about voter registration are that it only matters for presidential elections. Ensuring that you are registered to vote for local elections is just as important and arguably even more important. ¿Cuáles son algunos conceptos erróneos sobre el tema de inscribirse a votar? Algunos conceptos erróneos sobre el registro electoral son que solo es importante para elecciones presidenciales. Asegúrate de que estás inscrito para elecciones locales porque son de la misma importancia o más importante que las elecciones presidenciales. How does voting work if you are at a college in a different state? If you go to college in a different state from where you grew up and you still have a home where you used to reside in, you are allowed to make a decision on which state you want to vote in. This means that you want to vote in the state that is more similar to a battleground state, so your vote matters more. ¿Cómo puedo votar si estoy en la universidad en un estado diferente? Si vas a alguna universidad en un estado diferente donde antes vivías y todavía tienes una casa donde antes vivías, puedes decidir dónde quieres votar entre los dos estados. Esto significa que quieres votar en el estado que tiene una elección más cerca para que tu voto importe más. What is a common misconception about presenting identification at voting booths? Contrary to popular belief, in some states that do not require voting cards, you have a window of time in between when you vote and when you are required to present your identification. Another relatively unknown thing is that you are not required to show your driver's license, passport, or official ID. You can also bring bills or bank statements that have your address to verify where you live. ¿Cuál es un concepto erróneo que se trata de presentar identificación en cabinas de votación? En algunos estados donde traer tarjetas de votación no es obligatorio, tienes tiempo entre cuando votas y cuando necesitarás presentar tu identificación. Otra cosa que la gente no sabe es que puedes usar algo que no es tu licencia de manejar, pasaporte o identificación oficial. También puedes traer facturas o extractos bancarios que tienen tu dirección para verificar dónde vives. Why is registering to vote so important? Registering to vote is so important because it is the first step in ensuring that you are able to cast a vote for the representative that will help you. Registering to vote makes you more likely to follow through, and it also gives you the option to vote if you become more passionate about it towards the election days. ¿Por qué es tan importante inscribirse a votar? Inscribirse para votar es muy importante porque es el primer paso para asegurarte de que puedes votar por el representante que te pueda ayudar. Inscribirse para votar les hace más probable a votar si no estabas seguro y también te da la oportunidad si te interesan más las políticas. When should I register to vote by? The deadline to register to vote in Texas is October 5th. I recommend registering as early as possible to ensure that you get registered in time, but remember that you have to be at least 17 years old and 10 months to register to vote in Texas. On USA.gov, you can find the voter registration information for each state under the voter registration tab. ¿Cuándo debo estar inscrito? El plazo para inscribirse para votar en Texas es el 5 de octubre. Yo recomiendo inscribirse lo más pronto posible para asegurarse de inscribirse lo más fácilmente. Es que acuérdate que tienes que tener 17 años y 10 meses de edad para inscribirse para votar en Texas. En USA.gov puedes encontrar la información para inscribirse en cada estado en la página de registro para votar. Are there any websites or places where I can learn more information about registration? Some great websites to look at are vote411.org as well as going to vote.org. On vote411.org, you are able to check your voter registration status as well. Hay algunos sitios web o lugares donde puede aprender más información sobre registración. Algunos sitios web muy importantes son vote411.org y también vote.org. En vote411.org puedes checar tu estatus de registro electoral. Is there anything I should know about voter registration? Yes, even if you are registered to vote, despite the COVID pandemic, some states are only allowing certain demographics to vote by mail, with the rest of the people required to vote in person. To find an answer to this question, simply look up, "Can I vote by mail in," then put your state. Hay algunas cosas que debo saber sobre el registro electoral. Sí, aunque estás inscrito a votar, a pesar de la pandemia de COVID, algunos estados solo están dejando demográficas específicas a votar por correo y los demás necesitan votar en persona. Para encontrar la respuesta de esta pregunta, busca ¿puedo votar por correo en la elección de 2020 en tu estado? In this episode, we discussed voter registration with Hispanic Caucus Committeewoman on the State Democratic Executive Committee, Tzatzil LeMair. Using dialogue with a knowledgeable and well-informed political activist, we attempted to make the information regarding voter registration clearer. The resources we used are vote411.org, vote.org, and usa.gov, as well as the incredibly patient and kind Tzatzil LeMair. This is the last episode in this miniseries. I hope you all enjoyed it and found it useful. I would be happy if it helped even one person. I'm Victor Brown, and this was episode 6 of Correcciones y Conexiones. En este episodio discutimos cómo registrarse para votar. Usando diálogo con una informada activista, tratamos de hacer la información sobre el tema del registro electoral más accesible. Los recursos que utilicé fueron vote411.org, vote.org y usa.gov, y también la increíblemente paciente y simpática Tzatzil LeMair. Este es el último episodio en esta miniserie. Sería feliz si ayudó aunque una persona. Soy Victor Brown y esto fue episodio 6 de Correcciones y Conexiones.